Hi, I'm Steve Sanborn. I'm the president of Midwest Brain Health Technology, and I was invited to give this presentation by Kevin Wardlaw so that we could share some information about a new program that we call Redhead that is designed to assess concussion and rule out the possibility of putting an athlete back out onto the field before it's safe. In other words, we want to see a safe return to play. We have a way to do that objectively now using an EEG device developed by Wavi out of Boulder, Colorado. What we're looking at is called a P300 wave. This is a natural organic wave that your brain produces when it hears sounds. It has two attributes. One is the speed of the wave, and the other is the voltage. Now, without getting too deep into the science and the medical aspect of this, as I said, a P300 is a biomarker, very much like other biomarkers we're all familiar with, namely heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature. We know that those different markers have thresholds or standards. So if you place a thermometer in a child's mouth and it shows 102 degrees, you know something's wrong. And Wavi works in exactly the same way for the brain. I often actually call it the brain's thermometer. Now, we call the program Redhead because the topogram that is created in the report should display a healthy distribution of voltage, and that is represented by the color red. So for our purposes, red is good, blue, not so good. And there's definitely other colors that sort of range on that topogram in between red and blue. But for our purposes, red is really what we want to see in a healthy brain. In just a few minutes, we can scan any athlete for a concussion. If there's a question around an injury, the safest thing to do is simply assess what has happened. But even before that, the main offer through the Redhead program is to gather baseline screenings for as many athletes as possible. We want to be able to show a practitioner what that athlete looks like when they're normal, when there is no injury. Now, as I discussed with Kevin recently, some specific data out there does paint a picture that makes our program, we believe, necessary. Roughly 19% of high school athletes will report having at least one concussion by the time they're 18. But at the same time, other studies are showing that 50% of athletes who actually get a concussion only report them about 10% of the time. I want to introduce you also to Dr. Mo Mortazavi, who is a sports medicine physician and concussion doc out in Tucson, Arizona. Dr. Mortazavi's practice is Spark Sports Concussion, and he uses Wavi on a day-to-day basis. Now, I'm not going to get into showing videos of Dr. Mortazavi, but they are available in small clips, which can be shared anytime, so you can get a healthier perspective on why a doctor like Dr. Mo uses Wavi every day. Additionally, I want to introduce you to Dr. Frank Palermo, a board-certified physiatrist and medical director at Wavi. He also uses Wavi on a day-to-day basis. He's got a lot of amazing things to say about the device and about the reports that are generated instantly, but I just want to take just a few seconds to capture one thing that Dr. Palermo said while we were shooting videos with him recently.
Able to analyze small epochs, small areas in time of about 1/2 a second. And if you apply a tone to the headphones, now you can see the patient has a headphone on, tones are going into the patient's ear, it's being processed by the brain, and when the patient hears the odd tone, that's when the brain, as well as the trigger, responds.
So, folks, the key here is that the Wavi system, which is offered through the Redhead program, is really not offering anything brand new. EEG has been around for a long time, 100 years. And P300 measurement has been around since the 1960s. The main problem has been that the design of EEG in the past and the lack of algorithmic technology really prevented it from being used on a real-time basis. You see, now we can track reproducible data on a longitudinal basis. And what that means is over and over again, just like you would place that thermometer back in a child's mouth, right, several hours or days later to see if that fever has gone away. Wavi is used in the same way. What I do want to offer you, though, is a program that will keep every athlete safe. Should your child encounter some kind of a head injury, whether it be through sports or even something else, that baseline screening will provide vital information to a practitioner who wants to treat that patient and get them back to that normal state. Some studies show that upwards of 40% of athletes with a concussion return to play too soon. In other words, they still are in a concussed state. We want to make sure that that injured child or that injured athlete's brain state is showing a healthy level of red, which means voltage. We're after what we're going to call a no concussion protocol. The idea is that, of course, we can't stop every athlete from sustaining a head injury, but once they do have a head injury, we should be able to state objectively how bad the injury is and treat it over a period of time that keeps them safe, especially from returning too early where they might sustain another injury on top of the injury they already have. So if there's an injury, if there's a cognition problem or a mental or mood disorder, even a physical condition problem, the P300 wave as a biomarker is going to appear in a compromised fashion. And that's going to alert a practitioner that something's going on. Recently, we did a screening for a young man who's a hockey player here in the Kansas City area. He was on his fourth, maybe fifth concussion. And it seemed to the practitioner that he might have been nearing the time when it would be safe to return to play. But because of his history, the practitioner wisely decided to have him go for a screening, where it was discovered that his voltage, which should have been around 18 to 23 microvolts, was lower than 4 microvolts. Now, before anybody gets too worried about what that might mean, we are not suggesting that a patient like this has to stay in a dark room for the next week, for the next 6 weeks, and become socially inactive and depressed. That is not what we're after. But what we are after is a reasonable approach to how that athlete should behave and should function for some period of time that the practitioner will set. In other words, a young man with a voltage of 3.5 microvolts should not be taking headers on a soccer field. He should not be slamming into the walls in a hockey game. This is so important, especially for those sports where head injuries are common or can be reoccurring over time. Anyone on their second, third, fourth, or even fifth concussion should seriously consider getting a Wavi EEG scanning in the Redhead program. What we want to see again is a healthy amount of red, which means healthy voltage. And with healthy voltage, a 300 millisecond P300 wave. Those are the things that are going to tell us whether or not that injury is serious, or if there's just maybe a need for a week or two before an athlete can return to play. In any case, the main question is it worth not looking inside the brain? If it were any other kind of sports injury, we know without any doubt when we would or would not put that athlete back out onto the field. I mean, if there's a cast involved, it's just as plain as day that that person is not going to be playing, at least not for some time. Well, the same really needs to be true for the most important organ in the body, your brain. It controls everything else, obviously. And so we want to take extra care where injuries like a concussion can be easily sustained. In the past, this has been somewhat overlooked, or it's been difficult to assess. Wavi eliminates that with a 4-minute scan and in just a little bit of time, 20-30 minutes. You're done. You've got a baseline screening that you can now file away with your practitioner. Now, if something happens down the road, 3-6 months later, maybe a year later, there's a concussion sustained, now that practitioner has something objective to go back to and compare the current brain state with a normal brain state. And that's so important to be able to do so that, as I say, we don't underestimate the nature of the injury and put that athlete back out too soon to potentially sustain another injury. I want to let you know too that we've been running a similar program in Southern California for a private high school called JSerra for the last 3 years. Every sport program at JSerra has used the Wavi EEG platform to do a baseline screening and then to do follow-up measurements where head injuries occurred. Now, the fact that they're on their 3rd year of using our program should tell you something. And that's where we are now in the development of the Redhead program. We want to take it out to larger communities, and Kansas City is first. I want to thank Kevin Wardlaw again for inviting me to make this presentation to share with you what we believe will be an excellent program to keep athletes safe. We want to see those injuries that can't always be stopped from being exacerbated by other injuries, and we want to have a healthy respect for what a concussion actually is. The Redhead program, with the use of the Wavi EEG platform, enables us to do precisely that. So I invite you again for that baseline screening. Simply reach out to Kevin Wardlaw or even myself, Steve Sanborn. You can reach me directly at steve@brainhealthscan.com.